Well, so what do you see as some of the differences between MOUs written between parties in the US versus international groups in your experience?
Yeah, so the United States, because of its robust legal system, generally, and while I'm a lawyer, I'm also an academic. The lawyers sometimes don't really like the MOUs because, for the most part, MOUs are not legally binding. They don't have a clause in it that says if you didn't send us any students or scholars, we have a recourse against you. Generally, in the US, with lawyers at universities or even at the government entity, they would like to start putting in a lot more legalistic language in the MOUs. And so outside the US, the MOUs are much more diplomatically textual. They talk about the ideals, the mutual benefits. They might talk about a framework in order to achieve the ideals. So say you had an agreement or an idea of an MOU between two countries about a waterway and maybe cleaning up the waterway. Maybe you didn't have a treaty about the cleaning up the waterway, but both countries said we will benefit by making sure this waterway is clean, and how can we assist that? We are going to commit to putting resources in. That's, can be the MOU purpose, and you could just state pretty general ideas and maybe keep it to a page or two of text. And then if you need a treaty, or if you're actually going to share resources that have maybe monetary value or other things, you can then have another agreement and write that in order then to achieve your first agreement, which was the MOU in straightening the waterways.
Do you see any specific differences between MOUs written at universities and diplomatic MOUs? Are they pretty comparable, or are there some big differences, do you think?
I don't really see big differences. Obviously, the content differences, because your commonalities at a university are kind of cooperation and development of activities that are of an academic nature. MOUs from entities between countries or between agencies may deal with a different matter. Sometimes the MOUs that I have seen, I've not written any of these, between countries have a lot of a little more formalities that you would see in diplomatic wording. In the English language, they might have a bunch of whereas or proclamation kind of language to give it some treaty-like, but it's not a treaty or convention wording, where the university MOUs are mostly how do we exchange scholars, how do we exchange ideas, doesn't really lend itself. It's more plain. The ones I've done are more what we call plain language MOUs, where I've seen some of the country-to-country MOUs as having more of the flowery English language. There are also interesting MOUs, at least in the United States, and I assume outside the US, between agencies or between government agencies. So you might have an MOU where there's a housing authority, and there may be also a government entity that deals with elderly affairs, where the agencies are doing two different things and they have a lot of resources, but there's an MOU that to talk about how best can we provide affordable housing for elderly. And sometimes those MOUs then start using some language like the statutes of the agency or the mission of the agency, and they get a little bit more technical, but it goes back to the purpose of an MOU is for a common good or common purpose of the parties, and so whatever that purpose is, it's pretty standard that the MOU will spell out that purpose, spell out the parties, sometimes give you a framework in order to get to a solution or their desired solution, and then oftentimes says that all the details may come later.